Why don't I just say, first of all, great job, Steve. Even though your time is over, I mean, it's not really. You're going to come up here and join us, and since we decided to push back our break so that we can get out a little bit early, why don't you just come up here, and if we have more questions for Steve, you can ask him more. As the dean said, for this half that's kind of after lunch, we want to open it up more. So I would like you to ask questions to the panel here about anything, not necessarily limited to what we had to present, but any questions you have about teaching ethics, and we'll try to see if we have an answer for you. I see one already.
What have you found for assessment of the students' critical thinking capabilities through some of these? Are you guys giving like cases and having them analyze cases? Is that seem to be the best way to assess whether they really got this, or?
I think one of the things Steve and I both, and Judy just left, in 309, what we're doing is a film clip and a case example, and what we look at in assessing them is how many kinds of issues did they pick up on. So it's more the breadth of their analysis, not a particular answer, because being dilemmas as they are, there's not like a right or wrong. So we have a way of assessing based on that.
And cases are a great way to assess critical thinking skills because there is no right or wrong answer. You know, you have to do it. We're working with the English department on developing some materials to teach ethics as part of business communication, and part of that is also developing the students' critical thinking skills at a 200 level. Do you guys have any more about critical thinking?
I look for in the papers excuse me, the reaction papers. And it varies. In a class of 45, you could have the same case and have someone write 2 sentences or a page and a half. And it is amazing the level at which some of these folks will think about the dilemmas. And I see John has his
I was surprised, but I teach the capstone strategy course, and the students were doing a case analysis on Dr. Pepper. And there was an issue that had some ethical aspects to it, and in the case there was the public relations director, a phone number. Well, my students don't think real well, so they called and asked to speak to the CEO of the corporation. And after about 10 minutes they got through, and he talked to them and they videotaped, and he sent them a bunch of information. And in class we had about a 30-minute discussion by the CEO of Dr. Pepper Corporation on ethical issues. And I think you'd be surprised at the number of top-level managers that if students would avail themselves to those phone numbers that are there, they would get a lot more information. That's especially true on any case analysis. I was shocked that he took the time to talk to us.
And I was going to add to your question too. The handout that I prepared is a methodology that I've used in technical writing. And I divide my group, I usually have about 25, 27 students. We divide into teams of 5 or 6, and then we have a chart, and each team has its own case study. And then I don't intervene. They have to hash out these issues. But I find that a charting method, it gives them a place to collect and hold information and ideas, and then each group presents to the class. So you're welcome to use this if it helps you. And no blackboard has enough room for 9 slots. Usually you'll have room on the blackboard for about 6, but I added a few to extend this.
How big are the cases you're doing? Are they the little chapter mini cases, or are you getting larger ones where they're spending several weeks on these, or is this every week you're giving out the end of the chapter business case?
The supplemental cases I use, which I use pretty frequently, are full-blown cases, and gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the university in Canada that publishes a lot of them, and they're good 10 Ivy, yes, the Ivy School, and they're the full-blown case. The end of the chapter ones tend to be the mini 2-page and a half ones.
Those ones you're drawing the reaction, like a reaction paper.
Both. I'll do them. Actually, This last semester I didn't do it, but the prior spring semester, we did one full-blown case a week with one reaction paper each week. And it amazed me. I thought I was going to get hammered in my evaluations because it was a 400 level leadership class. And they did more work than some of my graduate courses, but I thought they needed to do it. And they loved it because it forced them. And we had Tuesday I covered theory, Thursday we applied it. And they had to come to class having read that case and written up a paper about it.
Are you putting them in groups, or is each student kind of doing their own work?
I did that individually.
Oh, each one has an individual
Yeah.
response.
And then we discussed it.
And I did it in groups because I have a variety of students. They're aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, pharmaceutical majors, pre-med, nurses. So with all those different backgrounds, they get a lot of interaction in the groups. But I'm doing technical writing.
I use short cases mostly because of the 16 weeks and the chapters and all that. But to get cases and topics that they really get interested in, I use a question usually when I'm doing equity theory and motivation. When have you been treated unfairly, either at work or in the classroom? And I get a lot of stuff. And it can last me all semester. I can use examples that I get from them, or you can just do it for one session. And I usually combine individual and small group and have a portion of both mixed with every class discussion on these topics. And I look at it from the perspective of, if you're sort of the victim, what can you do in terms of assertiveness and other topics in 309? And it also, then we turn around, so if you were the boss, what should you be doing as the boss? And this really helps them to see things from the other side and to see, well, when I am a boss, it's maybe not so easy to deal with people's complaints.
And the University of New Mexico and the New Mexico State University Daniels Ethics sites have some of those full cases as well as mini cases, that are just a few paragraphs long that describe an issue briefly. And I guess it depends on what your goal is teaching. Is this going to be the term project, the big project for the semester, or is it going to be something that you do every week? If it's every week, it's harder to do, a big full case every week and still get other content integrated in.
The other really good question that I've used is I ask students, have you ever been asked to do something that you felt was unethical or you were uncomfortable doing for work? And they have a lot of experience on those things too. And a good way to do it is then in a small group. Usually there's at least one or two that's something they could really get their teeth into and discuss it.
I would just back up what Bruce just pointed out about if you do the full cases each week and the time commitment, it literally cut my time to cover material in half, 50%, because it was Tuesday, Thursday class, Tuesday's theory, Thursday's up to you guys and your preparation. So it is, I would continue to do it that way because it worked really well and they got a lot out of it, but then you have to pick what goes, what stays.
Let me mention one other thing. The other thing I usually do is I have individuals hand write their own reaction. Usually the class before we're going to have a discussion on whatever the question that I gave them. And then I collect them, and a lot of times I tabulate the responses. How many people said this? Yes, they experienced this or that. And I give them some feedback because a lot of times students won't express something in class, but they will write it down. And what I'm amazed at is, like Steve said, they'll stay there at the end of class. Time's up. The other class is waiting to come in. They're still writing their story. They want to express what they've experienced. And I've had it mentioned on the evaluations afterwards. They say, oh, I think this is great that we write in here. And they only get credit for a daily participation, which it does count for a significant portion of their grade. But I find you don't have to give a kind of letter grade. As long as they wrote, I tell them, I review it. If you only wrote 2 sentences and it looks like you didn't think about it, you're not going to get full credit. But the other thing I discovered is they don't know math that well. If you make it 10 points, they think it's 10 points. Doesn't matter what percentage of the grade it is. And they want their 10 points. So.
Now cases are good. and have certain advantages. I mean, they're really great for getting at the complexity of business decisions, because it's all, once you get into the details, it's often not black and white. There's all these extenuating circumstances, and there's this information coming from the accounting and these pressures coming from this stakeholder group. And so you really get into the complexity. Like I said before, they're great for critical thinking. And so if you're trying to accomplish those critical thinking goals, because to do a good case analysis, you have to really get into the data and start weighing things. And they're great for student participation, like you said, unless it flops and then you got like 5 minutes of stuff. But it's really wonderful for aiding student learning, because here, you were teaching theory on Tuesdays, and then Thursday comes and they're doing their case and they're trying to apply, this OB theory to a real life situation. Well, that stuff's going to stick around in their brains a lot longer than the definitions and the terms in the book, because they'll say, oh yeah, PepsiCo did this thing that I remember from class like 10 years ago, and I don't remember exactly what it was called, but this is how it worked, and we're facing a similar situation now. That's stuff that's going to stick with them, and that's a really great advantage of cases. Cases also add that storytelling element, so it adds the human side. It's not just the raw facts, the rational. You can get to kind of some of the emotional things going on. Like the whole thing with Sharon Watkins, saying that she had a baby, and she was going back to work for this boss that she had real misgivings about, but yet she had this baby. She wanted another one. She was worried about the having the 3 months of leave, family leave, and these are the things that impact our decisions when we're in a business, because we're human beings. But they get left out if we're just talking about the dry facts. Of course, they have some disadvantages. Some people say, well, it's only anecdotal evidence. It's not scientific. Sometimes you have to limit the information, especially in a mini case, to make it a little bit simpler, and so you don't get all of the rich threads of detail that are going on. But a bigger problem is students often kind of lack the expertise and familiarity, and so sometimes they'll see something as black and white, when in fact it really isn't, because they don't see the complexity of what's going on. They say, oh, this is a lie, it's wrong, you can't do that. Whereas, there's other extenuating circumstances, and that makes it a little bit more complicated. And in real business situations, we wouldn't be put into making a decision, which is really where ethics comes down, is where you're making the decision. You wouldn't be put into a situation of making a big business decision if you didn't have some familiarity and experience in that particular area. And then you don't get the historical precedents. How has the company handled this before? Oftentimes, we make decisions as individuals, as companies, as organizations, like, what did we do last time this came up? And did it work for us? And if so, we'll do it again. And a lot of cases do still miss the emotional turmoil of, I have this gut-wrenching thing going on. When you're reading the case, it's not really happening to you, so you don't feel the same emotional turmoil as the actors in the case. So you can balance the good and the bad.